Morning, Ramfy.
Meet Ramfy. He's not your usual roommate. He's a pangolin pup. Like most of us, his morning involves being dragged out of bed, throwing down a drink before heading out to grab some breakfast, and then finally home for dinner and a well-earned sleep in his makeshift burrow. But this was all with one goal in mind: to return him to the wild. But Ramfy wasn't a normal pangolin.
What are you doing to my boots?
And raising a baby pangolin, well, none of us had ever done that before.
I've got a pangolin on my leg.
There you go. Now you clap. You can say action.
Action!
My name's Will.
Stood in an ant nest.
I'm trying to make it as a wildlife filmmaker.
I have been buffalo thorned. That felt so amazing.
And 5 years ago, I found myself caught up in something I could have never even dreamed of.
And now I just chose. This is good.
And it all started with one very special little guy.
You honestly are like a giant artichoke. You're an artichoke.
5 years later, I'm back in South Africa to tell Ramfy's story and meet the other people involved in this rare tale of hope. All to find out what happened to my favourite little scaly friend.
Well, it started on my way to work. I work as a state veterinarian, and I was on my way from home to the office, and I saw something in the middle of the road. And I thought, that's very strange. And I slowed down because I thought, it looks like a pangolin. That's very, very strange. Put my hazards on my car, started checking, is there traffic coming? Sort of pulled into the middle of the road so that the people behind me would have to go past me. Once they disappeared, I pulled over and I saw that it wasn't actually a carving, it was a pangolin, a very small one, who obviously then curled up from the fright. He was covered in soot and what looked like tire marks, and yeah, he was tiny. I didn't really have much with me. I just picked him up and popped him into my sun hat and started calling people. The nearest people I managed to get hold of was ProVet, and I said, look, I've just found a pangolin on the road, I'm bringing it in.
I think Jade had the on-call phone that night. I remember her knocking frantically at my door, like, we've got to go, get ready, we're going to ProVet. Helena's phoned. She's found a pangolin on the road and she's going to meet us at ProVet, so we need to go. We basically just came in to find just this tiny little ball, the smallest pangolin that I'd seen.
I remember walking into the facility where Jade and Natalie worked and seeing this little pangolin, and he was such a baby, and you know, your heart just melts because they're so vulnerable and so sweet and so perfect, and your heart just immediately opens and you just want the best for him.
Visually had a lot of trauma on the outside of him. All the scales were almost like grazed and a bit bloody, so he clearly had gone through quite a dramatic trauma. He needed medical treatment. He clearly had head trauma, and that sort of unfolded. We hydrated him and warmed him up a little bit.
Of the 8 species of pangolin worldwide, the Temminck's pangolin is one of the least understood. So Natalie and the team had to just act on instinct.
It's the nature of the injury, head trauma. It can go either way, and it can go either way quite quickly. We'd sort of hold him in a blanket, just almost cradle him a little bit, because that's what his mother would do. He would have been used to her being curled around him. I would pick him up, sort of give him a comfort cuddle, talk to him softly, and then he started to uncurl more and sort of look with his little beady eye and sort of sniff as well. That's another big one for them. You could feel him relaxing in your arms a little bit more as the time went on. I was holding him, and then he just sort of started with his nails just scratching a little bit, and then he'd like lick a little bit, and then you'd be like, "Oh, what are you looking for?" I know what you're looking for. We knew we needed to get nutrition into him. So then you'd get the milk, get it warm again, and you'd try and get it all right, and then just try and put it in that general sort of area where he's looking, and then it's not right, so he doesn't want to. And so you just continuously have this like back and forth, don't push too far, but try and do it in sort of a softly, and then it got to the point where we started to sort of lick your skin and then lick your fingers, and then so you put milk on them, and then just sort of put the teat in his mouth, and then yeah, eventually he just got it and then started drinking, which is relief, the relief of it, and you're just like, yes. And I think it's the first time that we could see a light at the end of the tunnel. He had much better chances of pulling through now. Yeah, it just gave us a lot of hope that we were on the right track to him recovering. So yeah, it was a good day.
Look at this giant tongue. Some nice milk.
We'll never really know what happened to Ramfy before he was rescued, but we suspected he may have been hit by a car. And despite stabilising from the milk, the symptoms of a more serious head injury were starting to show.
It was quite obvious that his posture wasn't correct. His tail position wasn't right, and he would do a lot of, rather than walking forward, he would push off and reverse backwards all the time. And then rather than correct his tail like he should, he would almost like fold over the back of his tail.
There was no guidebook in 2018 on how to raise a baby pangolin, so it was hard to know at what age Ramfy should have been starting to walk.
Didn't want to do a huge amount of walking. He wanted to be carried, which again, he'd reach up with his little feet so and want to be pulled up. I mean, we tried everything just to make him do some exercise, because he's a little baby who drank a lot of milk, and so he was getting chubby.
Ramfy couldn't walk for quite some time. But one day, he took his first steps and never looked back.
You'd take a few paces and then come back. He'd want to be on your leg, on your foot, on your hand. He'd want to always be having contact. He was very affectionate and very loving, and he'd always want to like nuzzle in, which I think is just because we had become his family. We obviously loved him to bits. Like, he was just delicious, just lovely. Just everything about him was lovely. Both of us were very proud of him and how he did.
So much of the news around pangolins over the last decade has been centred around their illegal trade. But as Ramfy was starting to come out of his shell, he was showing us that there was so much more to pangolins than that.
Everybody was just so in love with Ramfy. He was just this charismatic little pangolin that just, you know, had a whole tribe of people completely besotted with him and wanting the best for him. One day we had a little couch in the hospital, and I was sitting on the couch with him, and he was sort of rolling around and bringing his tail up and shutting his tail, and I was sort of had my finger there and tickling him. And then he was opening right up, and I would tickle his tummy and he would snap everything shut and roll around and then open it up again and wait for another tickle, and I would tickle a bit. And it became this tickle tummy game. It was crazy, and he rolled around. I mean, if he could have laughed, he would have been laughing and laughing and laughing. It was the funniest thing. It was such fun. And I mean, why wouldn't a pangolin, you know, have fun and play? I mean, they're a baby mammal after all. And then you start seeing that play, you know, when he's outside and he's wrapped around a tussock of grass and he's wrestling with it and opening and closing his tail again, exercising those core muscles.
As the months passed, Ramfy continued to go from strength to strength. And after a while, he even started moving on to proper pangolin food. Ants. But there weren't enough in this region, so Ramfy's adopted family had to say goodbye.
So hard to say bye, so hard. Yeah, it was very emotional. I just loved him so much. Our aim goal always is to get them back out to the wild. Like, yes, of course, it's lovely to have a bond with them, but we would create that maternal bond with them as a means to an end. Like, it's to be broken.
You do need to recreate that bond with a primary caregiver in order for the animal to feel secure and safe and be able to exhibit its natural behavior. But you have to create a balance. So as that animal is growing and developing as an independent individual, you have to kind of slowly start stepping back.
Nikki drove Ramfy to his potential release site in Zululand, where she was helping to set up a world-first pangolin reintroduction project. And Ramfy was the perfect candidate to join the program. And that's where I came in.
But before I tell you that story, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Rolling, 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 rolling.
Everything's rolling. Rolling downhill.
Wait. Action! Meet Jessie. She's not your usual researcher.
I promise I'm a serious scientist. I promise. I've lost my mind. There's not enough sleep in the world to help me.
But she is about to become a world-leading expert in pangolins. And her research is writing the book on pangolin reintroduction. All the pangolins here have been reintroduced from the illegal wildlife trade, so when they're released onto the reserve, they're fitted with a tracking tag.
We might be sitting there now thinking, oh, the pangolins have got tags on. Must be easy to find them. No, you're really wrong. It's so hard.
Pangolins spend a lot of time underground in burrows. Most of them are active during the night, so that's not very convenient. The tags can get bitten off by lions, they run out of battery, they break. The list goes on.
So finding a single pangolin in a 300 square kilometre reserve is not easy, believe me.
One of the really big reasons for wanting to do research on pangolins is that we know so little. So for me, that was really like a Jane Goodall moment where you had an opportunity as a modern researcher to be that person and to have that opportunity. How much space do they occupy? How often do males and females interact with one another? What do they eat? Where do they live? What kind of burrows do they have? So these are all basic things we don't know about Temminck's pangolin. She's out, she's out, she's out! Yay! Let's plug in that lady's data. Basically, I'm trying to scan for booty. I can hear from her tag that she's out feeding.
Walking in a Big Five reserve is no joke. At any point, anything from a lion to an elephant to a leopard or spitting cobra could be around the next corner.
Which isn't the most reassuring thing to go through your mind when you're wandering along.
Oh, this is gonna be the most graceful thing you've ever seen.
But when you hear those beeps of signal getting stronger and stronger, you know you're getting so close.
So she's in the thicket here.
Ramfy was very lucky to have been found by people that cared for him. But not all pangolins have the same look. Booty was found tied up in the boot of a car. She was severely traumatized and dehydrated, but vets at the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital nursed her back to health. In 2021, she was released onto the Munywana and given a second chance at a wild life.
Digit! Found it! Oh, pretty.
Seeing a pangolin for the first time is an experience that really sticks with you. They truly are like nothing else you've ever seen. Genetically, they're more closely related to cats and dogs than to animals like armadillos and anteaters.
Make that make sense.
They're bipedal, meaning they walk on 2 feet, kind of like a mini T-Rex, and they use this long tail as a counterbalance. They have an amazing sense of smell that helps them sniff for ants' nests underground. And then they use these big claws to open them up. And then once they find the ants, out shoots their long, sticky tongue that's almost the length of their body. And all this is wrapped up in this incredible armor of keratin scales. The only truly scaled mammal on Earth.
Kinda like a little pine cone with legs.
All the pangolins here have their own unique stories. And watching Booty in her element brought back some really good memories of walking around this very reserve, searching for ants with Ramfy.
But I couldn't help but think Ramfy wasn't really behaving like that, was he?
What are you doing? Why are you climbing on the windowsill? You're being a buffoon, aren't you? You're making a mess.
I moved in with Ramfy when I was doing a work placement at Pindar. The conservation team were a little short-staffed, so I was just in the right place at the right time, and Ramfy needed someone to give him round-the-clock care. Straight away, I understood why everyone was so obsessed with him. I mean, all pangolins have unique personalities, but there was just something about Ramfy that made him a little bit different.
Oh, you want it lower, do you? Jeez, you're such a sassy pangolin.
At times quite clumsy, extremely playful, very needy,
Relatable.
and like any healthy pangolin, he absolutely lived for ants and termites. The best chance we had of getting Ramfy back to the wild was to help him gain as much weight as possible. It was decided that if we could get him to reach 6.5 kilograms, then he'd have the best chance of surviving.
6.21 kilograms. Hey, someone's putting on weight.
Now, this involved a lot of walking and helping him forage for food. You're sweating permanently. You're scared you're going to get eaten or trampled every time you hear a rustle in the bushes. And worst of all, you get absolutely covered in ticks.
Not that.
But Ramfy's charm always lifted spirits. He had favourite species of ants that he wanted to try and find. He'd try and climb trees and clumsily fall off. Or he'd just roll around in rhino dung just for the fun of it. Everyone who spent time with Ramfy got to witness a completely different side to pangolins that we never even knew existed. At first, it seemed like things were going pretty well. But there was one big problem. Ramfy wanted to stay a baby for as long as possible.
Come on, little shitbag.
And unfortunately, our dear nocturnal mammal seemed to be a little afraid of the dark.
Ramf. Really?
I'll never forget my time with Ramfy.
But fortunately for him, I did eventually have to go back to England.
Leno Sierra spent the following months walking Ramfy. And like me, she fell pretty hard for the little man too.
I remember Simon coming back one day to his house and I was there and I'm telling him, like, Simon, I think I communicated with Ramfy. And he was like, oh, come on. And I'm like, I promise you. So he started doing this particular breathing, very deep exhale. And then one day I started doing it and he replied. So we were exhaling, communicating each other, and I mean, I just blew my mind. We know they don't have any particular sounds, but definitely their breathing and the way they breathe has to do something with his communication.
Not only was Ramfy creeping closer and closer to his target weight, there were also signs that he was becoming more in tune with the world around him.
It was a day that we came back from feeding, and I was feeding him his bottle. I heard the lion call, and I don't know if I heard it, you know what I mean? I didn't pay attention at all, but then he was like suckling with the eyes closed, and then he would stop and open the eyes like pulling. And I was like, what? And in that moment, I noticed that lion was calling, and I was like, you can hear that, you know what that is, hey?
Son leones, Ramfy. No pasa nada, aquí te cuido. Está temblando. Wow.
And I was like, oh, you're so aware. You're so aware. One day when we were doing his soft release, we would let him walk. Instead of helping him or recording, we would just follow him from a distance and see what he would do. And this day he started walking and walking in a direction that we usually didn't go, and walking and taking us through thickets. And at some point he started, I don't know, like circling very, very wide. And he brought us back to the car. He literally brought us back to the car in an area that he never walked before. And he just like mapped around an area and came back to the point of origin. We're like, oh my God, like this animal is very oriented. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows where we are.
Over the following week, Ramfy's behavior started to resemble that of a more normal pangolin like Booty. He even got over his fear of the dark.
Ramfy wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready.
The day came amid a lot of discussion, and then the day was decided upon, and he was allowed to then sleep out. And that's always nerve-wracking, you know, although you've done everything you possibly can to prime that animal for that moment. There's so many variables. You're just keeping your fingers crossed and hoping for the best. And Ramfy was fine. He was absolutely in his element. And I mean, it's the best thing ever to know that he's sleeping, you know, ensconced in a burrow underground where he should be. And for all those months that he had been in care, he hadn't slept underground in a warm, earthy burrow. And this was his first time. It must have just, I think, filled up every instinct. And he was a pangolin.
There's no better situation for a pangolin than away from humans. It doesn't matter how much I care about him, how beautiful I treat him, how much love I gave him. There was no better place for him than without us.
On the 30th of October 2019, Ramfy was released into the reserve, making him the first ever hand-reared pangolin to successfully be returned to the wild in South Africa. And one of the first 3 pangolins to walk on Zululand soil in decades. An absolute army of people rallied behind Ramfy for 2 years. And only through their collective effort was this historic milestone reached.
Our tiny ball of scales, found alone and afraid on a tarmac road, was finally back where he belonged.
So this is where we found him over here. On a game reserve like this, you've got a team of anti-poaching guards and a fence patrol team. And that morning when Ramfy was found, it was one of the fence patrol team that he was patrolling the fence, and he called me to say that he'd found a pangolin dead next to the fence. And we didn't, at the time, know who it was. But then when we came down here, it was definitely him.
Ramfy lived 2 full years as a wild pangolin, completely alone and free to roam wherever he liked. He was thriving. He was doing so well, in fact, that he even started to explore the world outside the reserve, digging back and forth under the fence without any issues. But debris that had built up from a storm had blocked his usual way out, and he got stuck on the electric wire. And that was that. Ramfy was gone.
People who knows me knows just emotions come out, so I may cry. They said that unfortunately Ramfy was found dead, electrocuted in an electric fence, and they actually sent a photo of his body, and I don't know. Yeah, it was very, very sad, very, very deeply sad.
Nikki messaged, because she, because she's, Oh, I don't know why I'm upset. I don't really want to be upset. Oh. Hang on. It's not like me. Hang on. That's weird. It's been so long. I think it's talking about him.
It's okay, just take the time you need.
Yeah.
In South Africa, if you have a conservation area or protected area and you're keeping predators or high-profile game species in the game reserve, it's a legal requirement to have an electric fence on the inside of your reserve. And it forms a vital function in that way.
It's only in the last few years that we've started to realise the enormity of the threat posed to pangolins by electric fences. It's estimated that around 1,000 pangolins a year die from electrocution.
When you have something like that happen, and you lose an animal in a fence like this, if you have the capacity, you change what you do a little bit, if you can. So our response to that was to raise this wire slightly, not a lot, where it still seems to be reasonably effective against the other wildlife species that we need to keep into the reserve, but it seems to be having less effect on the pangolins.
Finding out about Ramfy was a tough one to take. It was a huge loss for all of us.
But it wasn't anybody's fault. There's nothing that anybody could have done differently at the time.
Sometimes things do just go wrong. And what really matters is how you respond to it.
I got signal.
There's a slight beep. And so I'll probably give him like 5 minutes just to move away from his burrow.
Jessie's got an idea. She wants to trial a new kind of pangolin tag that hopefully should alert her if a pangolin gets too close to a fence. And she wants to try it on a young male named Spook, because he's living in the same area that Ramfy used to be in, and lately he's been getting quite close to the fence line. As usual, armed ranger Siabonga's here to keep us safe, but Jessie needs an extra pair of hands for this one, so she's brought along ecologist Kerin for help.
I think there's a game trail that came on the other side here.
No, how's he so fast? What sweet child of summer.
Let's go into the thickest, sharpest area.
I love this. Love this for my life.
He's
so fast because he was in the burrow and then he was very much in this thicket.
Bit thick for a camera. Oh, the wires are hooked. It's all going wrong. Mind your business.
Oh guys, I'm gonna absolutely die. I think he's on the other side of this thicket. I just walked us through hell for no reason.
Camp.
Any joy?
Yes, here.
Oh, well, you could act a little more excited for success.
That is Puck. He has now heard us. He is looking in our direction.
Icebergs. Iceberg. Hi, my buddy.
Reintroduction as a concept and a conservation tool is such a cool thing because a lot of people are quite pessimistic about animals and our rate of biodiversity loss in the world in general. And it is a problem and it is alarming. But we do have these tools in our little human tool bag that we can bring out and we can try to rectify the wrongs that we've done.
The tag's working. Yay.
Woo! Yay! Luckily I brushed my teeth.
There are so many bad news stories out there about pangolins. And for a while, I thought that Ramfy's story was just another one to add to the pile. But seeing what this reintroduction project's become over the last 5 years, seeing Ramfy's death be a catalyst for change, I can see how much of a legacy he's left here. Not only have countless other pangolins confiscated from the wildlife trade been given a second chance at life in the wild, these reintroduced pangolins have gone on to have natural-born pups of their own. Like this one that's getting its monthly weigh-in, named Bongi, the Zulu word for blessing. And Bongi's the pup of Spook and Booty. A fully wild pangolin pup, naturally scared of people, as it should be.
Hopefully one day I'll come back and visit and there'll be pangolins everywhere. Like little Ramfy here.
Make no mistake, the future of pangolins is still very uncertain. But Ramfy's story is proof that there is cause for hope out there. I'm hopeful because people like Jessie are out there writing the book on pangolin reintroduction. And because people around the world like Natalie, Jade and Leno dedicate so much of their time to rehabilitate them. And because people like you can now spread the word about pangolins too.
I knew that what little time he'd had, he'd enjoyed, and that he had touched a lot of people. Ramp will be sorely missed, and yeah, I hope his legacy lives on.
Big yawn.
Ramfy's death was genuinely really devastating for everyone involved in his story. But we have to remember that he was found abandoned on a road, battered and bruised and unable to walk. Yet he went on to teach us so much, and his story became the guidebook on how to hand-rear and save other orphaned pangolins just like him. And most importantly, when all's said and done, Ramfy made it back to the wild, where every pangolin should be.